In this video series, I'll explain through the Emidex recipe system, including recipe definitions, recipe planning, consuming ingredients into a recipe blending process, and finally, creating stock from this process. In this first video, I'll be explaining through the recipe definition process. Recipe definitions are used within Emidex to configure the ingredients that are required to make a recipe. I will firstly navigate to my recipe definition screen within the system. This will show me a list of recipe definitions that we have configured within the system. All Emidex data grids are flexible and allow end users to be able to configure, slice and dice the data to find the record that they require. For example, I can filter the list using any of the columns. In this case, I will search for the word Italian, which will then present me with the filtered results. Now that I have found the record I'm after, I can then double-click the recipe to view the definition of the actual recipe. Within this, you're able to see standard fields such as the recipe number, which is automatically generated by the system, as well as the description, which we can populate. Depending on how the system is configured for your company's individual needs, we have the ability to allocate a target product for this recipe, or alternatively, we could use the product file to associate products as outputs to a recipe. In this scenario, you would have potentially multiple outputs to a single recipe. Against the recipe definition, we are able to configure the optimal batch size for each recipe definition. In this scenario, for this selected recipe definition, it is 500 kilos. We are also able to allocate a specific label design to the recipe definition if it is required, as well as the print quantity, as we may wish to print additional labels. Within the table below, we have a list of ingredients that are required to make this product. In this example, we have 4 ingredients, such as beef trimming, pork trim, water, and some meatball spice units. For each ingredient, we configure as to what the ingredient type is, such as raw material, dry ingredients, and so on. The prep type allows us to specify if the ingredient is a sub-recipe or a pre-recipe, and the unit of measure comes from the product file. Each of these fields can be overwritten if required for individual recipe definitions. For each ingredient, we then allocate a weight percentage against the entire recipe. Once all ingredients have a weight percentage allocated, this should then equal 100% as per the sum at the bottom of the grid. For each ingredient, we are also able to have a minimum and maximum tolerance to ensure the operators weigh the correct amount of each ingredient during the blending process. The tolerance can also have different unit of measures to the previous unit of measure. The instructions section allows us to add instructions for each of the ingredients that can be displayed on the blending terminal for the operators as they blend the ingredients into the recipe. We can also display these instructions on various reports if required. The must complete column is indicating if the ingredient must actually be complete before completing the individual batches. The priority column can be used to determine a sequential order that the ingredients must be weighed into the recipe. This will force the operators to weigh ingredients into the recipe in this specified order. This video was an overview of the current recipe definitions within Emidex. In future, the recipe definitions will be replaced by the Assembly Bill of Material module. In the next video, I will show the recipe production planning, which will allow me to use a recipe definition and plan work orders for this recipe.